Thanks everyone for tuning in. Uh, Today's topic is going to be very regrettable because it is a rather big waste of money. And on my Patreon, which is one of these is I'll remember my Patreon without having to actually Google. So on my Patreon, I just concluded a poll in which I believe by a 90% to 10% margin, people said that I should be talking about more positive things rather than more negative things. And I do consider Patreon to bind both my blog and, no, sorry, 87 to 13. And I do consider Patreon polls to bind both stream and blog. I mean, sometimes they ask what to blog about or what to stream about. Sometimes they ask more general things like this. Unfortunately, it's rather difficult to find positive things to talk about whenever we discuss American public transportation, and the worst is always mainline rail. This is very regrettable. Um, Normal public transportation, so things in America that are not mainline rail, because there's this mentality that commuter rail is not public transit, it's commuter rail, and intercity rail is sometimes viewed even differently. Sorry, even more differently. I forgot that word, more. But the parts that are kind of not mainline rail, usually there's a lot of good things that are happening, just at excessive costs and with a lot of leakage. And by leakage, I'm probably going to do another video on leakage. Leakage means money that is spent on capital but not on expansion. And mainline rail is just far worse. I mean, spending just doesn't go anywhere. The entire Metro North. So this is actually going to be relevant to our topic, which is Connect 2035, NEC Commission Plan. Um, so this is about the Northeast Corridor, which is the worst of these because it has the worst problem of deadwood. The other states, at least the ones that try to do high-speed rail rather than more Amtrak, sometimes had okay plans that just went haywire, like California. This is a lot worse than the California high-speed rail program, and I would like us to explain why. So here is a plan that says it's a 15-year service development plan and infrastructure planning process for the Northeast Corridor. It was announced, I think, 3 days ago, uh, and I'm going to talk about everything. I'm even going to talk about the graphics a little bit, but I want to focus first on the content. Um, so um, the core of the plan is that they're going to do a bunch of upgrades, and I'm not going to name the upgrades yet. I'm just going to talk about the goals and the costs. So these are the goals. Um, okay, I'm going to do it like this because I know that my face covers kind of the bottom right quarter-ish of the screen. So I'm so this is roughly where I can go with my mouse. Okay, so. And this comes from NEC Future Record of Decision, which is by itself a rather bad plan. Uh, so Amtrak Acela intercity travel time. Ignore the top line, please. And let's look at the subsegments. So DC to Philadelphia is being sped up considerably. So the kilometer points are New York to Philly is 145 or 144. New York to DC is 360. So they're planning to make they're saying New York to DC is going to be rather fast, especially DC to Philly. And that is not nothing because it's what, 360 minus about 145, 144. And so they're planning on having it average 150 kilometers an hour, which is bad, by the way. Don't get me wrong. This is bad. This is roughly the sprinters between Berlin and Munich. This is a line that is half high speed, half low speed. And the decisions made in that line were in many ways just bad. Berlin, Munich. And to get there, this is a 600. So Berlin, Munich is 600 kilometers. So it's 600. It's a little, no, sorry, it's a little more than 600 kilometers. I think it's 630. The sprinters do it in 4 hours. Uh, The previous speed was 6 hours, so slower than the Northeast Corridor is today. So slower than the SL is today. And to get those 600 kilometers from 6 hours to 4 hours for a sprinter, 4.5 for a normal train, that took about 10 billion euros, and that was excessive spending. Excessive spending that was panned in the German media before the line opened because it involved heavy tunneling, heavy and unnecessary tunneling due to localism, kind of the opposite of NIMBYism. So NIMBYism is when people are being selfish and don't want the line near them. What happened in Germany was the opposite, was people being selfish and wanting the line in their state capital, Erfurt, Thuringia. And as a result, the line had to tunnel through very thick mountains. So this ended up costing 10 billion euros for the entire program. And where Berlin, Munich should have been 3 hours, and in fact, it can be, if they complete the line, which is going to be for a lot less than 10 billion euros at this point, because they did all the hard parts, it's going to be about 2.5. No, Google Earth, I don't want to send you feedback. So this is Thuringia. The line was supposed to go roughly through Leipzig and then eastern Thuringia. I never remember whether it was going to pass through Jena or Gera. And there are mountains that get you from here to, no, the mountains don't get you, sorry, the mountains separate Thuringia from Bavaria. And over here, they're kind of annoying. And then over here, you can even see kind of on the map, it's less developed. The mountains here are thicker. So they had to do a lot of tunneling around here because Thuringia insisted that the line not go through Gera or Jena. Again, I forget which, but through Erfurt, the capital. So it's kind of a detour, but again, more tunneling. So 10 billion euros for 600. This should all tell you, by the way, that Germany can build 600 kilometers of high-speed rail for 10 billion euros. We wish. No, but 600 kilometers, which are about half high speed, yeah, that's how much it cost. And so they're proposing roughly that quality of service south of New York. And New York to Philly, for some reason, they think it can be even faster, which I'm very skeptical of because, look, DC to Philly, DC to New York, they're saying the difference is 45 minutes, and that's actual high-speed rail speed because that is almost 200. Which, by the way, I think is possible, but aggressive. So that's the only part that's aggressive is New York Philly, and then north of New York to New Haven, they're saying it's it's an hour 05. This is 117 kilometers. So they're talking about a speed of 108 kilometers an hour on average. It is a speed that I have claimed before and will defend myself on it. That is feasible without what I call zero concrete. No, Munich, Berlin. So Munich, Berlin was supposed to be 3 hours, but the construction compromises. Chiefly, they tunneled too much unnecessarily, so parts of the line had to be left low speed to stay within budget. Instead of 3 hours, it's 4 hours. It could have been done for 2.5 hours. 2.5 billion euros over that length is a fantasy even in Spain. I mean, in Spain, where the construction costs are abnormally low, something like Berlin, Munich would have been, the entire thing would be about 10-ish billion euros at this point. Whereas in Germany, about half of it was 10 billion euros. And yes, Fulda got for transit. I mean, there's also like an entire thing about Fulda in German high-speed rail. Yeah, so they're not listing current times. I can just tell you what the current times are. And yes, I can buy more monitors, but so for completion, no, I doubt it can be done for 2.5. Let me think. I mean, I'm tempted to say that probably being completionist on Berlin Munich is probably another 8-ish, I'm guessing, maybe 7. Yeah, but the low speed bits are long. But at any rate, so avoiding Germany for a moment and going back to New York, New Haven, this is a line where they're proposing a bunch of bridge replacements that are kind of cool, but they're being overly expensive. And there's also something I'm going to go over in a little bit about the endless track renewal program. But the bottom line is that something that is that for a cost that is measured in hundreds of millions of dollars, not billions, they can do this. So this is really good. So let me tell you what the times are today. DC to New York right now on the Acela is about 250. So they're cutting 40 minutes from New York to DC on the fastest trains. So they're splitting it as 125 DC to Philly and 45 minutes Philly to New York. The current trip times on the fastest trains are about an hour 40 on this, and getting down to 120 to an hour 25 is pretty vanilla. And then about an hour 10 New York Philly and getting down to 45 minutes is an actual challenge. They're spending a lot of money on it, mostly because they want to be able to say that they run it at a top speed of 165 miles an hour. This is 260 or 270 rather kilometers an hour for those of us who use normal measures. New York to New Haven right now on the Acela is about an hour 40. Like on Amtrak in general, it's about an hour 40, and on Metro North, which makes lots of commuter rail stops, it's about 2 hours to 2 hours 10. Sometimes there's one train a day that's maybe a little shorter. I do not know whether they mean literally the fastest train of the day that only happens once a day, or something that can be done on a regular schedule, let's say on hourly, even bi-hourly. So this is where they're spending. This is where they're getting the most trip time benefit. It's about 40 minutes ish, and the thing is, this is also the easiest part because it is so slow today. And the reason it's so slow, it's not that the line is curvy. Yes, the line is curvy. The limit of of what you can squeeze out of the curves of the line is this. So, and they're doing an hour 45, so 40 minutes slower, and they think it's really expensive to get this, which it isn't. It's hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe about $1 billion to do this, maybe. And finally, they're saying New York to Boston is 245, so New Haven to Boston is an hour 40. It's basically the same as today. Today it's about an hour 50 on the fastest SLs. This is actually the only part where you see big differences between the SL and the slower Amtrak. Maybe parts of New York, of Philly, Washington, but New Haven, Boston actually is a big difference between the Acela and slower Amtrak trains. First of all, this is a genuinely curvy line. Second of all, this is a segment where the Acela gets to tilt. It does not get to tilt between New York and New Haven, or it does. Sorry, I'm sorry. It does get to tilt, but it does not get to run any faster than it would if it didn't tilt, for stupid scheduling reasons. And then south of New York, it tilts, but not much. So the Acela gets to use its tilt between New Haven and Boston, and second, so this maybe doesn't look so bad, but this is actually really bad, these curves. And second, the regional trains make lots of random stops because in this segment, the regional trains kind of are actually almost like Union Express and not intercity. So they stop at Old Saybrook, New London, Mystic, which is here. No, Stonington is past. Yeah, so this is Mystic. Westerly, Kingston, and only then Providence. So this is something weird about New Haven to Providence being very slow on the Amtrak regionals. But it's actually decently fast on the Acela, even though the line is terrible, because the Acela kind of gets to run as intercity service on the segment. Yeah, the regionals are kind of the locals as there are no other trains. Exactly. Now, normally in America, there are no other trains. If you want local service, get fucked. But New Haven to New London, especially sorry, New Haven to New London is commuter. Sorry, I meant New Haven to Providence. Yeah, they actually keep the regionals as some kind of long range regional service. And so this is a plan to do some speed ups New York to DC, bigger speed ups New York to New Haven. Which again, this is not nothing. This is not worse than nothing. This is better than nothing. However, let's discuss the cost of this better than nothing thing, where remember the biggest component is basically a track renewal project. I'm going to skip all of the other things and skip and go to financial strategy. Approximately $100 billion. spend, and this is in 2020 dollars. So American governance tends to cite costs in year of expenditure dollars rather than constant dollars, the way it's done here. However, this is them making plans the correct way, so in constant dollars. So in 2020 dollars, this is 117 billion. Now, 117 billion dollars, we can fire up the database, which is this, and see what 117 billion dollars normally gets you. It's not every high-speed line built in the world. I think it's actually every high-speed line in Europe to date, possibly. I think I may have some gaps, but I don't think I have big gaps. I might have Spanish gaps, actually. But so let us look at the construction, at the normal costs per kilometer, and some of them are in old years. We will try to avoid doing old years. So this, for example, is in today's money about 50 billion a kilometer. This is for lines that were heavily and frankly unnecessarily tunneled in Germany. These are the first two, Hannover, Würzburg, and Mannheim, Stuttgart. And we can look at the French ones, which were built better. So not the base tunnel from Lyon to Turin, which is rather expensive because 69% in tunnel, but the others are. You could kind of see on this list the numbers. They're usually not high, and they're maybe in old dollars, but they're not very old dollars. I mean, maybe it's from a few years ago. It's not going to be a big difference. So yeah, I mean, maybe in 2020 dollars, you could just update it to 30 million average, maybe for lines that are not zero tunnel, but are close to zero tunnel. So 30 mil. So we're saying $30 million per kilometer. This is full high-speed rail. So all of these lines. So for example, Siderop Atlantique. This is and together with Atlantique. So it's not, you can't quite sum these because because Atlantique has a branch. But together it's about together it's about 550. So again, don't sum these because there's branching involved. It's about 500 and a bit, I think 520 or 530 kilometers between Paris and Bordeaux out of these two lines that were built, and the trains take a tiny bit more than 2 hours. So these costs, so these are line 22 and 30, and these costs, these are what this costs. So essentially, we're talking about something that that if the Northeast Corridor could do it from scratch, it would be 15 to 20 billion dollars. For again, speeds that are an average speed of about 250 kilometers an hour. And this is from scratch. Now, of course, the Northeast Corridor has a problem. Yeah. If you're assuming, yeah, if you're doing it at Wedlingen, Ulm costs. However, first of all, Wedlingen Ulm is not the best example. I think it's more tunneled than necessary. And the Northeast Corridor is in a rather flat area, so it's not perfectly flat. So, for example, the North German plain, parts of it are actually flatter, but for example, the parts that are between Hannover and Dortmund are probably about comparable, honestly, to the Northeast. So it's not a coastal plain. This is why you see all these curves. It's because you kind of see there are little hills here. So it goes from the water pretty quickly. It goes to about 80 meters above sea level, but that's not especially hilly, and you can do it with some viaducts, a lot of cut and fill. But things are mostly on earthworks, and not especially complex earthworks at the end of the day. And you can kind of see that I-95 here is not a complex construction project, especially if you've driven it. It's not a complex It's not complex construction in anything here. It's small hills, well within the capabilities of cut and fill, way better than in southern Germany. And there's also no attempt to be freight friendly here. An attempt that I must add in Germany is bad. But here, but in this case, the Northeast Corridor, it is bad. They don't do that badness, but somehow they have the costs as if they had that badness several times over. So there's a question mark. And the worst thing about it, remember, they are not promising high-speed rail. High-speed rail should cost 15 to 20 billion dollars. 15 is more likely because remember, the Northeast Corridor is easier to build than from scratch because parts of it are already high speed. I mean, they might require some facelift. So I don't mean New York, New Haven, which gets you to medium speed. So the old part of the line is what is in America called 1 degree. It's the Canton Viaduct. And we call it 1,746 meters curve radius. The degree, it's a kind of a weird curvature measure. But essentially, you should think of it as curvature with the rule that 1 degree equals 1,746 meters, so 2 degrees is 873 and so on. So it's a pretty wide curve. I mean, with modern trains, I mean, Acela tilting or Shinkansen tilting or Talgo tilting, you can squeeze, I think, 230 kilometers an hour out of it. And these parts you can squeeze 300 plus. This is an annoying curve. So the old line went like this, and this is a cutoff that was. You could kind of see this is a curvier part because they weren't trying to go high speed at the time. 100 kilometers an hour was fast, and the maybe 1850s, 1860s, or even later in the 19th century, but they want to run through Providence. This did not run through Providence. So this line, but this part does not need to be built to rebuild as high-speed rail because it already is high-speed rail. This part, same thing. This part, same thing. South of New York, it's not minor facelift. It's called the moderate facelift because the way this works is there are fast portions with slow segments at poorly placed areas. So you want the slow parts to be in one area and then long straight segments. However, not how it's done. So rather the slow segments are interspersed at annoying intervals. So you fix the Elizabeth S curve. You fix this annoying thing. Curvier than deluxe here. This curve is generally good. There's a little facelift that's required, but not terribly important. And then the rest is high-speed rail. This is why they're expecting high speed out of this. They're specifically planning on fixing small bottlenecks here. And this is good. It's just that the cost is excessive. And this is also a really important thing to fix. And then, so you don't need to spend $30 million a kilometer on this because much of this you need to spend $0 per kilometer. Maybe $0 per kilometer on civil structures, and then you need to do track renewal, which is very cheap. Track renewal is on the order, and this is with everything: new rails, new ties, new switches. That is going to be on the order of, I believe, $1.5 million per single track kilometer. So about 3 million if it's double track, more if it's quad track. So the entire thing, if you track renew the entire thing, which is not even necessary. The state of the tracks around here, I think it's actually pretty good. That would be probably maybe $1.5 billion, $2 billion. You need to do some catenary replacement. That would be that is even less, I think. It's costing a lot when they're doing it because Amtrak has really high construction costs because Amtrak has terrible capital cost control. But it's not actually a difficult project. And somehow these facelift projects, remember, they're planning on making the Acela 5 hours, right? Where was it? Benefits. Let me see if they can actually post it, if they're actually... Okay, so here is the current thing they're doing. So these are faster than usual trains, but actually maybe no. I mean, I think the DC NOEC might actually be a few minutes faster. But anyway, these trains combined are 6 hours and a half, DC to Boston, and they're planning on, with everything combined, making it 5 hours. So this is average speed we're talking about. It's the speed. It's 1960s speed, and I don't mean Shinkansen 1960s speed. I mean French trains in the 1960s speeds, 1970s, the ones that the TGV replaced, and they're saying that that's going to cost $100 billion. Now, why are they saying it's going to cost $117 billion? Let's look. They're doing it by segment here. And they're even telling you about all the things that they're going to do for track replacement. By the way, so they're saying that they're going to replace this many turnouts. I would like people to make a guess right now. What? Yeah, but why would there be freight traffic? This is not an important freight corridor. There are parallel freight lines for most of the lines. So, for example, between New York and DC, I think they might have some legacy freight, but there are literally parallel lines that were built by competing railroads that have heavier freight traffic, like around here and here. The Baltimore and Ohio. So this is stuff from the Baltimore and Ohio, which got absorbed by CSX. So there already are freight corridors. The problem is east of New York, there's a paucity of Hudson crossings by freight. But that requires electrifying freight, and Americans don't know how to electrify because they think batteries will save them. Their problem. So it's not even about four tracks. It's mostly double track, which is what it should be. It's just that look again at what they're saying. So they're saying that they're going to replace 9 million linear feet of rail. Now, I don't know what 9 million feet means because I do not speak feet. So a foot is this quantity of meters. So they're saying they're going to replace 2.7 million meters. So 2.7 thousand kilometers of rail. Now, there are two rails to a track. So this is 1.4 thousand kilometers of single track. And now, to put things in perspective, and so let's not go to this post. Let's go to, so there's an actual post I wrote about a Connecticut plan, which is a really good, so let me find the Connecticut plan because this is the most relevant thing. It is this one. So it is this post. So this is the report. Yes. No, 33 is feasible is the positive one. This is the negative one. But the post that I wrote about it has some comparanda. So we can actually look at costs in Germany. So they are doing track replacement on our longest high-speed line. This is Hannover-Würzburg. Now you might ask, wait, I'm American. I have not heard of Hanover. Maybe I have heard of Hanover, but what is Würzburg? Oh yeah, it's that city from Turin Taxis. And this is not even being American, but I lived in the US before I lived in Germany, and I did hear of Würzburg first through the game Turin Taxis. So just in case people, just to remind people that German intercity rail investment is actually bad. It just looks good in comparison with the United States. So when I'm saying America is worse than Germany, I'm not saying Germany is good. I'm saying America is bad. Würzburg. So this is Würzburg. It is a small city in northern Bavaria. The point of this line, I keep not having this line mostly because. So let's pretend that a lot of these lines are crayon. But this line that I'm tracing over is real. So the way this works is it's just west of the inner German border. If you look very carefully, so these are the state boundaries. So you can kind of say it's just west of the inner German border. Germany just ran out of north-south capacity because there wasn't much of it, and much of it went through the Iron Curtain. So they built it as a mixed line for freight and passengers. Getting to the largest municipality of West Germany, which is Hamburg, could be done on a legacy track, and then getting to the other very large cities near the line, Frankfurt here, and then Munich could be done also to some extent on slow legacy track. By the way, the legacy track don't go like this. So legacy track went roughly this alignment. Then the old legacy track from Nuremberg to München didn't go through Ingolstadt. It went through Augsburg. So it went like this. Ingolstadt to Nuremberg is actually a recent high-speed line, and then Munich to Ingolstadt is a slow line that connects them. So this line is the longest and oldest high-speed line in Germany. 320 kilometers, 320. It's 327 of construction, but I think I've seen 320 for the track renewal project. and they're saying they're not doing track and roll on all of it, so 327 times 2, 654, but they're saying that they're doing most of it, so 532 single track kilometers, and the track renewal, including new rails, new sleepers, switch replacement, is slightly more than €1 million per single track kilometer. It's about $1.5 million per single track kilometer. So the Amtrak plan, they're talking about replacing new rails and ties. Now, what is a tie? It's what Americans call a sleeper, and how closely spaced are ties. The rule is that there's 1,660 sleepers to the kilometer. Yeah, no, Hannover is decent by German standards. It's just I think Hannover is like the 10th largest metro area in Germany. So it's what pretending the Rhine-Ruhr is a single one. It's Rhine-Ruhr, Berlin, Frankfurt, Hamburg, München, Stuttgart, Mannheim, and I don't think Hannover is number 8 because there and then it's I think it's a four-way tie between Hannover, Bremen, Leipzig, and Dresden. Okay. So where's the 100? Yes, that's the whole point. It's insanely expensive, this track renewal. So rail replacement, remember, don't just do railroads because the comparison is with ties and turnouts. Ties are, again, 1660 to the kilometer. So just divide by 1660, 816 single track kilometers. So they're not even replacing that many ties. Whereas this project that I'm comparing with is full replacement of rails and ties. So it's a bigger project, relatively speaking to the size. And switches. And let me see if I can actually, let me see if, so I don't remember how many switches are placed where necessary. They're not at even spacing or anything. So let me see if I can, oh, 224 turnouts over 532 single track kilometers. I'm not going to say too much, too little, because it's just, again, it depends on, I mean, you don't put switches on random running tracks. Switches are when you need to turn, right? So switches are where you have stations with sidings, where you have branches, where you have yards. So 224 switches. And this is 4 times as big, 900. So 900, so this is again 4 times as large. So actually maybe the ties are, not the ties, the turnouts are maybe slightly more closely spaced. Now ask yourself, how much does it cost to replace a turnout? Now, Hulu in comments here actually knows the cost better than I do because he just learned the exact formula for this in uni. Whereas I remember, yes, exactly. Switch costs depend on the parameters. Now, you would expect that Amtrak would get the best switches for its high-speed rail service, right? And it actually is correct. They're actually starting to get some turnouts based on the latest technology of the 1920s. These are called tangential switches. A tangential switch is one of these days I will, yeah, this. So please look here. So these are called secant designs. These are not, so there's actually an abrupt change in azimuth because the bits that move, the inner rails, are straight because that was the state of metallurgy and engineering in the 19th century. So in, as they say here, 1925, Germany had tangential switches where the bits that move, the switch curves, are circular. And this is also, and by then, with better metallurgy and better engineering, the frog here. So this point is called the frog. The frog is curved, whereas in the United States, the frog must be straight. So Amtrak is slowly getting these, not everywhere. Let's not. Let's not be too modern. Reject modernity, embrace tradition. So reject the modernity of even early 20th century standards and embrace the tradition of 19th century standards for rail. Uh, but this is actually a big cost problem because Americans don't know how to build these. But even when they don't, even so, Metro North. Um, a list of cost items for Metro North was leaked to me, and apparently Metro North on its normal switches spends something like $1.2 million per switch. And to put things in perspective, over here, a typical switch. Again, it depends based on how fast you want the switch to be, but like normal switches um, for let's say I don't know 80 or 100 kilometers an hour. These are not. These are not intended to be high speed switches. These are not for. Remember, the Northeast Corridor needs no high speed switches because it's a back and forth. It does not need high speed diverging moves. The turnouts would be for slow trains. Would be when a train enters a station on a siding. It would be when a train diverges at a major city. Let's look at the map again. Not this. This is page 22. Territory map. Let me see if there's a map of the lines here. I will. Yeah, great. So there are divergence points like Philadelphia and New Haven, but you're not going 100 kilometers an hour through the switch in Philadelphia anyway. You're right next to the Philadelphia 30th Street station. The train can barely even accelerate that fast, let alone literally everything else about the state of the track geometry there. New Haven, same thing. So you don't need very fancy switches. You just need switches that are reliable, high capacity, and still you want to get tangential, not sorry, not these are secant, tangential switches because you want trains to be able to go through a switch at a major city station at 80 kilometers an hour and not the current speed, which is sometimes 15 miles an hour. So 24 kilometers an hour. You can save minutes just through rebuilding the interlockings into Penn Station, which requires no change in right-of-way geometry. It doesn't require moving the columns, even though there are small geometric differences between this and this. There have to be, but the train isn't going to sway less here, so you're going to, so even when you're moving toward a column, when you have better switches and it's not going to throw you from side to side, you can actually gain clearance just by having trains that sway less so they can get closer to the static clearance envelope. Because what matters is dynamical clearance envelope, but when the train sways less, dynamic and static are closer together than when the train sways a lot. And right now in America, on these, because it's an abrupt change in azimuth, the train sways a lot. But I believe you can say, I never remember the exact time saving. I believe it's a minute and a half-ish on each side of Penn. I believe it's a minute to a minute and a half that you can save by going from here to here on each side of Penn Station alone. So 2 to 3 minutes. Which again, it's not nothing because you need to work weekends and nights because you can't work at rush hour when you need all the available space at Penn Station. But you can still work weekends and nights. And by the way, this plan, not this plan, this plan, the reason it's a 4-year project is that they're doing it in drips because because when they do work, it slows the tracks down. So they want to do it during summertime when there's less traffic. And you might ask, oh, so maybe it's slower in America too? No, because in America, they already slow the traffic. It's called flagging. And the flagging and this thing that I link to from Connecticut actually will tell you that the New Haven line, again, slowest part of the Northeast Corridor, even after the planned upgrade, it's going to be the slowest part of the Northeast Corridor, is under essentially permanent flagging speed restrictions. They've been spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on track renewal, going back to the late 90s. It's a mostly four-track line. The last few kilometers into New Haven are only three-track, but the rest is four-track. But they can never use all four tracks at once. There's always a segment that's reduced to three tracks, even two, even at rush hour, because of this constant track renewal, which again, here, not only is it's a one-time project, it could be done in a year. It is taking 4 years because they're dripping it in order to spread the pain around and do it when traffic is lighter. But the Northeast Corridor already has these slowdowns because of these flagging restrictions. The flagging restrictions are so fundamental that the requirement for signaling for automatic train protection in the United States, they don't call it what we call it, which is ATP, automatic train protection. They call it positive train control. And the fancy thing that they want to add is temporary speed limits for flagging. So when there's work being done on one track, trains obviously are never going to go on that track, but on the adjacent tracks, trains will also slow down. It's a normal thing. It's just that usually the best practice is to only do work when there's not going to be a train on the adjacent track. So, for example, if you have single track tunnels, I don't actually know if the lines here are single track tunnels. Newer high speed rail tunnels, I know, are in Europe always single track. So it's two separate boards. So you do work in one board and you don't disturb the other. It's not about this. It's mostly about people not wanting trains to pass each other at a tunnel, inside a tunnel at high speed because of air turbulence issues. In Japan, they don't care. In Japan, they just get trains that are better pressurized and have these really funky noses. The purpose of the funky nose in Japan is not for vanilla running air airflow. It's for tunnel. It's because of the tunnels. Because the tunnels were designed for 200 and for 210 kilometers an hour back in the 50s and 60s, maybe even earlier. And so when the trains want to go 300, they have to either make the tunnel bigger, which is extremely expensive, or build the trains better. They don't use the expression electronics before concrete in Japan, but electronics before concrete. Spend money on making the train nose nicer rather than on taking an existing tunnel and running it. However, even in Switzerland, the home of electronics before concrete has a slogan. When you build new tunnels, they will be bigger and they will be single track. So not the line's going to be single track. The line's going to be double track, but each line separate. So it's easier and you don't need flagging. I think in the United States there's also an escape clause about what if the tracks are sufficiently separated on the surface. But a lot of older lines don't even have that separation. The track center distance is too narrow. Now, normally what you should be doing is doing work during the nighttime. But if you can't, then yeah, you need to do flagging, which is what they do here in Germany. The flagging in question, the reason they're dripping it is because of these slowdowns. So I don't actually know if the slowdown here is flagging or if they're shutting down the line and having trains take the slow line around. So we use the privilege of having slow lines around, but it's comparable in effect to flagging, so it's not terribly important which you do. Yes, one of the elements is to increase speeds into South Station from 10 miles an hour to 15. I will get into that in a little bit, I promise. Do they still use spikes to pass in the rail to the sleepers? I do not know. It will not surprise me if they do the ancient bit, but I do not know. And I just want to make it very clear. Switches here, at the speeds that are needed, are going to be $200,000 to $300,000. Yeah, diverting all traffic is safer than flagging. You just can't divert all traffic on the Northeast Corridor. Sorry, not going to happen. There's no alternative. Some people think there should be an alternative for resiliency. Please don't do it. Building a second line just for having an alternative is like taking an existing tunnel built for 200 kilometers an hour and widening it to one built for 300. Don't do it. Electronics before concrete, just get the trains to run on time. And it's the same with the Northeast Corridor. It's a one-time thing, the flagging. And thankfully, this is a four-track line. So if you're okay with single tracking bits of it during weekend, which is going to be really annoying, but if you know where to place the turnouts, you can even possibly get away with it. Every track is separated by at least one track from another track, if you're 4-track. And the most annoying part in America is not actually the Northeast Corridor, it's the approach to Chicago from the south-southeast on Metro Electric, and that's 6 tracks. So when you have 6 tracks, you can always shut down at least, in fact, 3 tracks for maintenance at a time, and then have 2 tracks in service without flagging. So I mean, sort of. I mean, it's not. I mean, their scheduling is much less regular than this. It's not like this. It's more. It's a 4-track line, but some part of it is always going to be reduced to 3-track, to 3 tracks. So they keep tweaking the schedules around that, and they keep changing the slow order, and it's all done on slow orders. So it's not quite. So it's never this neat. The American railroading is extremely unsystematic. It's a big difference that I noticed when moving here to Germany, is how scientific things are here. So there are papers at universities that the university is very proud of what it did to make the trains run better, even on the subway, on matters of engineering, timetabling, and so on. And in the United States, it's all kind of done as it's all done on a tinkerer basis. People say it's just academic as a slur, whereas here I've never heard that. Not in railroading. It's like saying you might as well say it's just academic about, I don't know, vaccination. I mean, if you say, "Oh, you can't," let's not inject science into. Let's not inject academic science into a discussion of mRNA vaccines or something. That would sound absurd, right? I mean, mRNA vaccines. The idea of it came from an academic researcher, and then some private companies kept developing it, and they thought it would be useful for cancer, and then came Corona, and they retooled. BioNTech thought that they were going to use mRNA to either cure or alleviate cancer, and then came Corona, and they realized, oh wait, we can use this to vaccinate against plague, and so there's a lot of change in lots of links in the chain from academic papers to this, but the academic research is critical, and it's the same with trains. And in America, people just don't think systematically. They don't write systematic schedules. They don't try to systematically make sure that the line has very simple speed zones, very regular, very regular crew and passenger timetables. And it comes, I think, from the same thing. It's all done on a tinker basis, on the basis of managers who say that they're fighting fires all the time, and nobody questions how come when these managers are around, fires keep erupting. And so the bottom line is, these turnouts, they're saying, oh, it's so difficult because they're replacing 900 turnouts. This is together low hundreds of millions of dollars. There are even machines that can do it, and you can even see which countries don't do it with machines, like France, because France, which is not normally a high-cost country, spends twice as much per turnout as Spain and Germany. Catenary poles, likewise, they're saying they need to replace all of these, but I mean, first of all, I think they're spaced 50 meters apart or something, so that's this many kilometers, which is not a lot. But generally, there are weird things about catenary pole spacing, but I'm not going to criticize too much, mostly because I know the headline costs of electrification, but I can't give you any smoking gun for how it sucks in the Northeast. I do know that when Amtrak electrified New Haven to Boston, the cost had a premium, but not a large one. Caltrain, its electrification project, is a disaster with a very large cost premium, but again, this is Caltrain. It's similar in many ways to the problems in the Northeast, but there are key differences. And now they're talking about replacing bridges, unclear why. Interlocking, that's just more turnouts. It's not expensive. All of these things are cheap. All of these things are incredibly cheap. They don't add to 117. They don't end up to 17. I don't think all of these combined should add up to 7. So now, what is the 117 coming from then? Because it's not these. And yes, there is a giant Amtrak cost stream. Even without, it's not 117. And you can kind of see. So New England is 12. Connecticut Westchester is 9. This is, by the way, this is the 9 that I said should be about high hundreds of millions, maybe 1 billion. You see a lot of New York City Metro, 55. And this is what they're bundling into it. So they're saying that it's all about capacity or something, but it's not. It's just agency imperialism. So 55, most of it is Gateway. Gateway, which is, so let's go New York City Metro. I have not read this report before. I just know what Gateway is. So this is between Trenton and New Rochelle. So also some speed improvements in this segment, I imagine. So there must be lots and lots of maps and graphics, because Americans think that if you have text, then people can't read it, because Americans, it's not that Americans are illiterate. Americans are in no way, shape, or form dumb. Americans are not illiterate. Americans are not ignorant. However, first of all, there is a serious problem of an incuriosity in America about the rest of the world. Second, the elites in America are incurious, and this is the problem. The average German is, as far as I can tell, no smarter or dumber than the average American. Possibly slightly less hardworking Americans think that working all the time and only getting 2 weeks paid vacation is normal. I'm literally so I mean, you may have heard the stereotype that if you email an American and they're out of office, they will say, "I am about to, and I'm about to go to through difficult double bypass surgery, and will return, but don't worry, it will return in 2 hours, and my phone is next to me." And a European will say, "Hi, I'm on vacation. I will be back in 3 months. Toodles." And it's a stereotype, but I'm currently emailing a bunch of Swedish experts for the construction cost projects, and these people are on vacation until early August. So yeah, work-life balance works differently from in America, but it's not like one here. It's not that people here on average are smarter than Americans are. That's my experience. I mean, none of the proxies that I would normally use suggest that. However, German elites are more globally curious than American elites. That is a big difference. And German elites are far from the world's most curious. They're possibly Europe's least curious in some sense. Maybe our elites and the French elites are probably the worst, I would say. So Americans think. So Americans think as a collective, which is again elite mediated, that Americans are not. So American elites make all of these things with random graphics everywhere. So here, map, which did need to be this big, random graphic that says nothing, of a conductor, because I guess they must show a conductor, and then only 2 paragraphs of text. So the New York City metro territory is central to the NEC. And again, more graphics and insets. And finally, a map that actually reveals information by showing you what is being happening. And so they're talking about things like bridge replacements, some of which are good, some of which are bullshit. For example, they talk about clearance for marine traffic. The marine traffic in question is pleasure boats. I mean, sometimes the bridge is more expensive than buying out the marina. They're including Penn Station access. It's a commuter rail project that is Cuomo's baby and therefore very expensive. The entirety of Penn Station, this includes tunnel, they include the Gateway Tunnel, which is good, just severely expensive, and other things next to Gateway, which are sometimes necessary but too expensive, sometimes completely unnecessary, like the Penn Station expansion. Penn Station does not need new tracks. Americans think it needs new tracks because the railroaders who don't know how trains run in Germany think it needs new tracks, but it does not need new tracks. However, it's an opportunity to condemn an entire block of Midtown Manhattan for several hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate acquisition alone, and then several $billion building the cavern underground. They don't care. They don't realize it's completely unnecessary. And again, a bunch of things, some of which are good, some of which are just terrible. And so they're saying, okay, look at how much track renewal already. But again, all of that together, I mean, it's rounding error. I mean, these are not expensive things. New rails, new ties, new turnouts. Again, it's vanilla things that are done here for money that is a rounding error. So they're trying to talk about important assets that need to be replaced, but again, it's cheap. So what's happening here is they're bundling. They're saying this is the Northeast Corridor plan, but it's not. It's a potpourri of random things, some of which are about commuter rail, some of which are about agency imperialism, that is Amtrak taking over the old ARC project and turning it into Gateway, and then the new Penn Station plan. Let me see if they were going to have a specific thing about the new Penn Station in this. As I said, I didn't read this before streaming. I just knew what was going to be in it, and I long learned that I'm never going to go bankrupt. Saying in advance that a mainline rail plan in America that I was not involved in is bad. And I'm going to go over I was not involved in because of this point about this point about what did you say before about South Station interlockings, because this is something that we do address in the Transit Matters plan. Yeah, because transit matters. Yeah, there's refer all over German PR for rail projects, but I will yeah, Julio, I know, but I'm going to go over, but I'm going to show you in a sec what I'm contrasting this with. So let's see, schedule of investments, Gateway East. Like you see all these projects again. At no point did anyone sit down and write down a timetable. Sometimes they talk about when they talk about timetables, they say trains per hour. They don't give you a timetable, and they only talk about rush hour because they think nobody takes the trains outside rush hour, because trains are to be taken if you're going between cities, or if you, like in normative American, live in the suburbs because you think the city is a dirty, crime-infested hellhole with. You no longer say with black people. It's 2021. You're not racist like in the 1970s. You're supposed to be racist like in the 2020s. So you say things like police abolitionists instead. And then you find the one black boomer who you know who talks to you, who, because you're an American elite, this random black boomer talks to you like you're their social superior because you earn 5 times what they do. And they tell you that they don't like that their children are queer or something. So they say, oh yeah, normal black people are with me as well. And so you have all these information light things, and it's not because it's a preliminary thing. I have literally never seen sample timetables out of America. And let me close the thing about the locomotives. And here's the comparison that I'm making with Germany, even on the level of the presentation. So this is available to the public. This is the plan for the Deutschlandtakt for 2030. So there are a bunch of maps. This is the Fernverkehr, so intercity map. And there are smaller insets for each state or group of states of Germany that will also show you the regional trains. And this is every intercity train that Germany plans to run in 2030. The dash line means it's every 2 hours, and with minutes after the hour, straight means one of the straight either straight. I won't say straight means even hour, and italic means odd hour, but maybe it's the other way around. Yes. So for example, over here, and trains here on the right. So trains, you're not going to be able to see. So here, trains from Basel going, and the colors are the speed costs. So trains from Basel going north depart 06 and 36 minutes after the hour every hour. So two hourly lines that are exactly offset. That's just a way of saying an hourly line. And also slower trains depart 30 exactly offset. And the slower train, but and sometimes the trains don't all make the same stops, as you can see. So one of these trains skips Offenburg. Somehow it's a slower train that skips Offenburg, and the faster trains are supposed to stop at Offenburg. I guess they're only going to be faster. This is a 250 kilometer line, so kilometers an hour line. So the red versus orange is not going to be a big difference. I guess it matters farther out. And even the trip time here is the same. To Mannheim, and then you can see where, and you can track. I mean, you need to know how to read this table, but it's available to the general public. And it's been available to the general public for a number of years now. I think I think I saw it in 2019. So they know the timetable to within the minute based on an investment plan more than a decade in advance here. Are things going to go haywire? Probably. There might be schedule slips. But okay, so this might not be the 2030, this might be 2033. But I mean, that's what they're planning on running. And Amtrak never provides this information. American Railroads never provide this information. They provide information like infographics. Like here, they're talking about express service and new services, and they don't really tell you anything about the local versus express distinction, and they try to make everything local versus express. So there are several different services, so commuter rail and intercity rail, each with its own local versus express distinction, because people want to feel important by taking the express train. So everyone needs to have an express train. So there's a giant number of train classes. It's not like Spain, but worse. So somehow America manages to be worse than Germany on what Germany sucks at, which is average speed, worse than Spain on what Spain sucks at, which is, or Southern Europe in general, which is operations and clarity, and worst of all, worse than Britain on what Britain sucks at the most, which is costs. The planned cost of this, remember, $117 billion. It's basically like High Speed 2, except High Speed 2 is high speed rail, and this is not. This is medium speed rail. This is the average speed of the trains that High Speed 2 is replacing. This is the speed of the trains that the speed of let's call them the faster trains here that the NBSs are replacing, the speed of the faster trains in France that the TGVs are replacing. And and again, look at this presentation and look at this presentation. So this is the German plan for transport investments by 2030. And they can give you, and there's interesting information that you can see here. For example, they talk about the financing. So say the cost is going to be 270 billion euros to be spent by 2030. And they're even going to give you a quick breakdown of what it's like. So Bundesfernstraßen, this is federal roads. Schienenwege, this means trains. Wasserstraßen, this means canals. So this money is spent 49% on roads, 42% on trains, 9% on canals. It is expected that in the event of a green-led government, and especially a green-led Department of Transport, this balance will change in favor of trains. Now, the polls, unfortunately, are showing that the general public in Germany thinks that it's completely fine that the Minister of Health is paying €6, is having the federal government pays €6 per mask for distribution to elderly people through pharmacies. His husband's company is in on the take. Masks on the free market would cost about €1 at the time. But again, the general public is okay with it now that we're vaccinating. Maybe it will change its opinion when the fourth wave uh, is a thing. So you can kind of we're already fourth waving, unfortunately. It's hard to see on this. Maybe you can see glimpses of it on this map, but it's easier to zoom in. Fourth wave. We bottomed at the beginning of July, and this is where we are now. 1,500 a day. Um, and but if people decide that they like this, then probably it'll be the split. If people decide to go back to how people wanted to vote 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and there's a Green-led government, I imagine it will be different because it is a well-known interpartisan difference that the Greens want to move money away from roads and toward bikes and trains. I do not know what the National Green Party's policy is regarding high-speed trains, though. I know there are a lot of Green parties that hate high-speed rail. The NIMBYer ones, I'm sure a lot of Greens in Germany do as well. I don't know whether Die Grünen here as a national party do. And so you have the roads versus rail distinction. And you have, and they're even telling you which is renewal and which is new lines and which is new connections. Um, and you can see how much is being spent. And you can see that the Northeast Corridor wants to spend in dollars what we're planning to spend on all trains in Germany combined. And this is again about half of it is renewal. So half of this leaks to renewal, but this is renewing an entire national network, not a 720 kilometer line. And you can even see in this plan, there are graphics and maps, but the graphics and maps are informative. So this is the base case. This is the expected bottlenecks if no changes being made. So you can see, for example, there are 3 lines from the Rhine-Main. So this is Mainz, this is Frankfurt. So 2 from Frankfurt, 1 from Mainz to Mannheim. And despite that, 2 of them are rather busy, and one of them is that's the main intercity. It's the busiest in terms of capacity, and this is actually not only the busiest in Germany, it's I think the second busiest in Europe. It's narrowly behind the LGV Sud-Est between Paris and the split between Dijon and Lyon. So again, very busy line. And this is the freight line. I mean, Nuremberg to Passau is not an important passenger line. It's just very heavy freight traffic. There is some freight traffic here, not as heavy as here. Hamburg to Hanover and Bremen to Hanover. It's a combo of passenger trains, but also freight trains because these are important ports. Um, and then you can see the map if the planned improvements are built. So it's harder to see them, but these do exist. For example, this line from Frankfurt to Mannheim did not exist there before because this is the planned Rhein-Neckar, this line. So this line is this line is planned to be built to speed up the traffic. It's going to go from, I'm forgetting how much. I want to say it's going to bring Frankfurt Mannheim from 40 minutes to 27 maybe, but I don't remember. But they will actually tell you the exact trip time in minutes. In the FAQ. But it's also built here because of capacity reasons. And so again, you can see the things. You can see the things that probably should be built. I mean, it's not necessarily because of capacity, because some of that is by freight, but again, it's just a map of what should be done. So, and the same thing with canals, because again, it's a national transport plan. It's not just for trains, alas. Whereas here, it's all the infographics. They're never going to tell you what the schedule is because the schedule is changing every few months because of new track renewal, because they don't know how to do track renewal at night, because they don't know how to do maintenance at night. They don't know how to space track renewal so that passengers get 30 years of quiet. They don't know how to integrate the infrastructure plan into the timetable. And this is what happens in America. And yes, so here is a brochure. Sure. So let's look at the brochure. Here's a big difference. This is a 7-page brochure. You're not making me read through 200 pages. Second thing, sure, there's a graphic. This is still way information denser, even with the pictures than everything, because yes, there's a map here, but the map tells you where all the stations are, and where and some of the changes that are being made, whereas a lot of the graphics on American things are not. So even this brochure for the public is far information denser than this, where I'm just seeing a construction crew, because if you're not showing pictures of blue collar workers, the terrorists have won or something. And it's kind of weird that the United States does this so much for a country where blue collar workers are respected significantly less than here in Northern Europe. In fact, a disrespect that makes it harder for me to do my research, because in Sweden, I can actually talk to labor reporters on this field, on this topic, because they openly talk about the blue collar workforce, because it's a normal subject to talk about labor. This is not something it's not treated as just as a cost, but also they're not spending, I don't know, 5 times as much as they should on superfluous labor. So yes, the court, you were asking about transit matters. So I'm going to talk about something called regional rail proof of concept. This is a rather weird PDF, because this is not the proof of concept. I believe it's the proof of concept, but it's the same one with Worcester, because we released them at the same time. This is probably our most technical thing to date. There's going to be the electrification document, which will be released very soon. There are people who have already seen it. There are people outside TM who have already seen it. You kind of see slogans like organization before electronics before concrete. But I emphasize here because we're talking about, we're talking about frequency, or rather we're talking about what at the, so we're talking about what at the throat of South Station in Boston, so the main station to Boston, to points to suburbs in the south, and because all the main cities in America are south of Boston, it's also the intercity train station. There's North Station, which is much less important. And we're talking about different ways that they can all, so note that we're not committing to a timetable here, because we give options. The Franklin line can interline via Fairmount, or via the Providence line, which is the Southwest corridor. And because again, it's called the Northeast corridor because it's the Northeast, but in Boston, it's at the northeastern tip of that, so it's called the Southwest corridor because it points southwest of Boston. Fairmount line is 6 to 8 trains per hour because because both options, 6 or 8, work with what we figured out. So again, you want to be flexible as much as possible without wrecking your entire infrastructure plan. And the point here that we're making, and so we're proposing how these can, so it's a 13-track station, so we're talking about how to slot it in a way that the trains will fit very easily and people will know years in advance what platform to go on, rather than having to stare like this at the board waiting for the train, waiting for the board to say what track the train departs. And now we're talking about the terminal interlocking. And this is the key. Now, part of it is about electrification, but we're also talking about, so what we're talking about is, today, trains are limited to 10 miles an hour entering South Station. And this is essentially because the turnouts are designed, I mean, I'm calling this steam era standards. But here in the 1920s, yes, it was technically the diesel era, but there were still mostly steam trains. So the design, so we're talking about German switches, for example, but this is also the global standard. So we're talking about how to to how to speed up the switches, and we're even. Let me see if I can find the costs. So we're talking about speeding it up from 10 miles an hour to about 30. So the switches can be sped up very easily to about 50 or 60 kilometers an hour, which is roughly the upper limit of a station with bumper tracks, like South Station. But even that is a 2-minute speed benefit that is essentially free. Let me see if I can find the costs here. So we're talking about if the switches are so modified. And let me see if I can find the costs. I know that I did have costs ready, but maybe we don't have I don't think we have footnotes here. Right, we have endnotes, and the endnotes are at the end of the entire thing and not just the end of proof of concept. So these are endnotes for proof of concept. We have switched from endnotes. I think we've switched from endnotes to footnotes for more recent things. But I don't think we have an exact reference to switch replacement costs in Europe, which, by the way, are also the switch replacement costs of American freight railroads. They don't have they don't have that premium on American freight. They replace switches for 150, 200K dollars. I mean, it's like low speed switches at higher speed would be same as here, so 200, 300. So this is why I'm saying standards are not, studies that I'm not involved in. Unfortunately, I hate that this is a thing. It's completely different from urban transit. In urban transit, I can find. Care about the bar graph. Sorry, I will come back. So the thing is, with urban rail, there's so much good reform in America happening, not so much from the reform organizations like T4 America, they're not very good, unfortunately, but people who are not boomers, people who are like my age and younger, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting stuff that's being done, but unfortunately with mainline rail, it's very stilted. And no, it is off topic, but I'm taking questions about related things, and NSRL kind of does matter to the Northeast Corridor. I mean, there are people who think that the North-South Rail Link Tunnel should even host Amtrak trains. It shouldn't, but there are people who think that. I think Congressman Seth Moulton might want to even try to slide NSRL as high-speed rail funding, which, for the record, is not completely dumb in a coordinated northeastern plan, just because it's an important piece of commuter rail infrastructure. It just shouldn't be hosting intercity trains. Which, by the way, to the congressman, I don't think would matter at all because he doesn't represent Maine. Like he doesn't. I mean, Moulton represents the northern suburbs of Boston, so would greatly benefit from better commuter rail service to Boston. But anyway, commuter rail in America is too stilted. Intercity rail possibly even worse. It's a very it's a very closed industry, and it's something that actually was really interesting when we're planning modernizing Rail 2021 because we're trying to, for example, get more speakers who are not white men, but it's very difficult to find people in mainline rail in North America who are not white men. In urban transit, it's very easy. Lots of people within the industry, at all experience levels, so even senior people. It's not just recent millennials. Lots of historically it would be mostly men, but not just white men. There would be lots of black men, lots of black people in America go into the public sector. So in America, black people are overrepresented in the public sector. Non-black people of color are underrepresented. But even non-black people of color are so overrepresented in the main cities that that New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, there's still lots of people in the industry, lots of very good reform people. I mean, some of them suck, but I mean, some people suck of like all racial groups. So lots of very good reformers. I mean, think who started Transit Matters. I mean, Mark Abuña. The name might sound Hispanic. He's not Hispanic. He's Philippine American. And now that he's left, our new executive director new. I think he's been an executive director. I think he's been an executive director for 3 years now. Jared Johnson. He's actually black. Lots of Asians, blacks, Hispanics, and rail advocacy, lots of reformers, lots of very technical people, but unfortunately, very, very little of that penetrates into mainline rail. Some does, but very little, and that is really unfortunate. And again, I'm not asserting that people of color are superior in this to white people. I'm not asserting that women are superior to men. These are both hogwash. But generally, if an industry remains extremely white and it's extremely male, it's probably because it's not open to new blood. And this means that also a very ambitious and very reform-minded white man might not get in. And so it's an indicator species, really, the whiteness and the maleness of mainline rail as an industry in the United States. And again, it's not something that you just fix by appointing political appointees as managers who are not white men. I mean, Sarah Feinberg is not a white man; she's a white woman. She was appointed to the head of as head of the FRA. Now she's the head of the MTA because she's a Cuomo lackey. I mean, she's not good at what she does. So you don't want to appoint these people. You want to appoint. You want to actually grow a good civil service, and because white people are not better than people of color, and men are not better than women. If you grow a good civil service, it'll be gender diverse and racially diverse. So again, it's an indicator species that the lack of diversity suggests it's just very close, and there's just very, very little good, to the point that something that's so our proof of concept, which is not a particularly technically difficult thing, we're proposing a bigger reform at essentially zero cost. I think we said it would be $20 million maybe, to fix the interlocking at South Station. So $20 million. And remember that the NSRL thing, not the NSRL, sorry, the NEC commission. Let's go to New England. Let me see if they're actually saying the number. That is Massachusetts. Oh, so and they're also doing a Massachusetts third track, which is also completely unnecessary, because they don't know how to integrate the timetables. And this is going to be a big cost because it's going from 2 tracks to 3. That's not a vanilla track and roll project. That's an expansion. Sorry, that's an expansion. Not that's an expansion. Sorry, but that is still that's an unnecessary cost. It's much easier. I mean, there are things you could do. Certainly, at the speeds they're proposing, they're not proposing to speed up. So remember, they're talking about 16-minute faster commuter service between Boston and Rexford Junction. But if the commuter service is faster, you don't need intercity trains to overtake commuter service because the speed difference is going to be reduced. Only if you're planning to make big changes in the speed of an intercity train do you need extra tracks, but they're not going to be a long third tracks island. They're going to be short, strategic, 4-track, not 3-track, timed overtakes. And let me see if they have anything. I don't think they're even talking about South Station here. Let me see if they say anything about South Station. No? Weird. Special groups. Oh, see appendix for full list of projects. So they are saying, oh, Tower 1 interlocking. That's what they're going to fix. But they think it's going to be 15 miles an hour, even though, again, twice that speed is completely vanilla. Appendix. Project list. Oh, and they're even talking about South Station expansion because they want more tracks, which is completely unnecessary. The proof of concept that we linked to is a refutation of this. This is why it is not required to be. It is not why this is not required. This is several. This is, I think, more than $1 billion, and is unnecessary. It has no benefit. It has little benefit. It has no benefit. No, 89% increase in commuter service is not 9-fold. It's slightly less than 2-fold. And it's mostly about the off-peak, not the peak. They're not planning on. So we're planning on a peak increase. So 4 trains an hour to Providence, 4 to Stoughton. Today it's not today, but pre-corona it was about 3 and 2 maybe. But the big increase we're proposing is off-peak. And by the way, what we're proposing, so 15-minute service evenly spaced to Providence, 15-minute service to Stoughton, coexists with 300 km/h high-speed rail with only strategic running every 15 minutes with strategic overtakes, because it's not even that what I'm doing is anything expensive or anything fancy. It's just very vanilla. I mean, it's something that an intern who does scheduling at SBB would be able to do. New York is harder to schedule. There you need an experienced scheduler at SBB, not an intern. But this, an intern can do. And they're doing worse for higher cost. Um, anyway, you were asking me before about about what we're proposing with NSRL, with there being more north and south. Let me see if I can get you the exact. So the role of NSRL. So we're saying that these are going to be viable, and I think we did in fact mention that they're not even. So this is 12, 20, 24, because because Wildcat means Haverhill has an orphaned inner segment, and this is 36. And then this contrasts with 8, 20, 32, 44. So first of all, Lowell can gain another branch, which we mentioned in the Lowell appendix, which will be released any day now. Yes, that's another 4. And so that's 44 and 40. And second, you can spam on the segment of Haverhill, the Reading branch. So yes, there is somewhat of a difference, but it's not that big, and you can just short turn things at terminal just north of Boston. There is a little bit more suburbanization south and north of Boston, but only a little bit. Right now, the ridership ratio is 2-to-1 because South Station is in the central business district, and North Station isn't. But with that getting fixed, it's going to equalize, and it's going to go down to like what is probably more like 1.1-to-1, maybe 1.2-to-1. So this is so again, it's going to equalize. Does that answer your question? By the way, getting the error of thinking that 89% is a ninefold, I mean, yeah, it's an error, but I mean, I've made worse errors. No, the bar graph, it's not the bar graph is off. It's that all of this is in multiples of 2 and 4, and this is in multiples of 3. So it's what, 12? Oh, the main thing is we're proposing to spam frequencies on Fairmount, and then Franklin would go through Fairmount. So we're proposing 12, 12, and then it's 0. So it's 12. So on the north, it's 12, 12. Actually, 12 with the new branch, with the other branch, and this can be whatever. I mean, you could just short turn things here on route to Reading, and then on the other one, it's going to be 8 probably, although it's going to be 8, but in a rather weird spacing, and 8, and then yeah, 12 and 12. I mean, you can make this work. Alternatively, you can just tag Franklin to Providence, and it's 12, 12, 12, and then 8. Again, it's all flexible. I mean, when the schedules are written, it shouldn't be flexible, but at this level of planning, that's fine. You only want to commit to certain questions like does Franklin go through Fairmount? Let me actually fire up the Google Earth thing. We don't have an appendix on that yet because we're actually done with the text of the Franklin appendix, but we want to include maps. Not graphics, not random illustrative graphics, like actual useful graphics. We have a great graphics team at TM. But it is rather labor intensive to make graphs of the map of the line. I mean, if we're proposing some kind of TOD, or if we're proposing some kind of elevated structure, photos of comparable things. So if there are pictures, there should be relevant. So so anyway, the point is that there's this pinch point here. So this is the Providence line. This is Stoughton, so it's a branch of Providence. This is called the Franklin line, and historically it was the same railroad as this thing, whereas Providence goes here. Now today, because this is a faster route, the Franklin line diverts to Providence, and this orphans this line, which is called the Fairmount line, and is used as a local commuter line, except they think that running it every 45 minutes, right next to a train that runs every 13, and even that, as they said in a video a few weeks ago, was criminally infrequent, is appropriate. We're pushing them. We're pushing them to make this not every 45 minutes, but every 20, even before electrification. With electrification, 15 or get the hell out. Ideally, 10 or 7.5. Since this is kind of winding down, are there any questions about this? And I don't mean about the TM plan. I mean in general about Northeast Corridor investments, about the terribleness of the Northeast Corridor Commission plan specifically. By the way, they're even talking about ventilating the Back Bay Station when we're literally proposing how to electrify so that they don't need to. I mean, everything. So I know New York North more than I know New York South, but it says something that I can like tell you about individual projects where they're unnecessary. So implement station accessibility upgrades. This means high platforms. If you were wondering how much this costs in the Boston area, the answer is $20 to $25 million, i.e., 5 almost full orders of magnitude less than the entire thing. Oh, right. I keep clicking the right button, which is as opposed to the down button. Attleboro implement first phase improvements. They're making this sound like a complicated thing rather than a few hundred meters of wire installation. The raising of the speed of 80 miles an hour to sidings are only ever used by stopping trains. Crossovers that are completely unnecessary. I mean, again, I can, like, the fact that I can look at every single one of these, implement station accessibility, this is, again, 25-ish, $20 to $25 million. $20 to $25 million. This is yard expansion, not terribly necessary. Like, this is how bad this is. I mean, all of these are just bullshit projects, or projects that are very cheap and don't even matter to a plan that they're saying is 117 billion. This is how bad this is. So again, are there any questions either about this or about more positive things about high-speed rail? Gonna give 3 more minutes for people to chime in with questions, and then I'm gonna end this. Or maybe, I mean, if people ask lots of questions, I will take more time. Let me see if there are more questions farther up. So this is about NSRL. Transit matters. It's more, no, the guess was not about the switches. The guess was asking is how much it costs per switch, because, yeah, everything is a state of good repair, but I mean, the state of good repair, so this is why state of good repair should never be, I mean, I have a video on this. I mean, so it's a convenience scam that lets agencies spend money without ever having to show anything for it. All right, if that's it, then thanks for watching, and I will upload. Hopefully, the upload will work because I. Oh, sorry. If I were given one line to upgrade, so ABS to 250, Los Angeles, San Diego, even if it weren't 250 but 200. Um, you want this to be done on the largest cities, right? So outside the Northeast corridor, the largest city is by far Los Angeles. I mean, there's also Chicago, but um, there's a weird issue with density in the Midwest where the secondary cities kind of ring Chicago without any kind of neat pattern to it. So I guess you could do this: Chicago to Detroit and Cleveland. But first of all, that's a really easy high-speed line because it's very flat here. And the approach to Chicago, as I said earlier, it's kind of annoying, but it's a six-track line. This line, so you just uh, exit around here and then pick your least favorite freight corridor, and then you just transition to a high to going near an interstate or going fully greenfield. These are farms that don't have a lot of land value. The value per unit labor is high, but I mean people can just move. And also the farms are in such a neat shape that you can just go due east here and not cross farms. Um, and then so this is a rather easy NBS. Whereas Los Angeles to San Diego is actually a really good ABS because the line already exists. It needs certain improvements. There are also improvements that are being planned that it does not need, like a tunnel between here and here. So you can kind of see that there's this annoying dogleg. Uh, this segment, if you just follow the freeway where they're already building light rail, I mean, they're building light rail. That should tell you that it can be done above ground, but they don't know what an EMU is, so they think it should be a tunnel for mainline trains, whereas it should be just another elevated like segment, or maybe even at grade if they can swing it, but above ground at any rate. For intercity trains that should be EMUs, so electrified. There are a few places that need some kind of right of way deviations. I think Del Mar uh, has certain problems with the bluffs here, although they might be overstated by NIMBYs that just want the trains out. So this actually would be a really good ABS. It's, I want to say 180 kilometers maybe. So if it's a straight line, which it is, it's 180. So I think maybe 190 on the actual tracks, and then um, getting it, and then I think it's 2 hours 50 right now. So you want to aim to make it an hour 45, I guess. So this is, so say 2 hours minus a turnaround time. If you make an effort, you might be able to, depending on the stop spacing, you might be able to do an hour and a half minus turnaround time. But that's more speculative. That's an average speed that's very fast ABSs here, like Berlin Hamburg, or mixed ABS NBS lines here, like like Berlin Munich maybe, or Köln Frankfurt, which is a fully NBS line, but it's really short, so it has long segments, relatively speaking, that are just slow approaches. So something like that speed. Again, it's NBS, but it's a longer line that can be done ABS at not an hour, but maybe an hour 20. That's very speculative, but an hour 40, 150 is very vanilla. So that would be a really good thing for this. Like it's LA San Diego is arguably the only real almost merger. I guess Chicago, Milwaukee, but they're smaller and growth in Milwaukee sucks, so you can't just expect EOD to happen. Maybe San Francisco, Sacramento, but they're still not quite merged. And people don't quite commute this. I mean, lots of lots of super commuters go to San Francisco, but I think at this point it's Stockton and Modesto, not Sacramento. So anyway, that's the answer, I think. Um, are there are there other questions? Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna give like 1 or 2 more minutes for people to think of other questions. If not, I can just uh, end this and make a pleb uh, video of only about an hour 45 and not 3 hours. Oh, thanks, the car. Thanks for watching. Um, all right, so thank you all for watching, and I will see you in a week with another video on a topic to be decided.